Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.
Rebecca Atkinson-Lord was Director of Theatre at London's Ovalhouse, now called Brixton House, until 2016, but since then has moved to Mull in the Hebrides as Chief Executive and Artistic Director of Tobar and Mull Theatre, the only producing theatre in the Scottish Islands. I spoke to Rebecca when she was in rehearsals for a stage adaptation of Sarah Moss's novel Night Waking, adapted by Shireen Mula, which will tour to a number of Scottish venues in September and October 2025. I asked her what the play is about.
So it's about this woman, Anna Bennett, who is married. She's a normal person, not sort of a middling, maybe lower middle class girl, done good. She's gone and got a PhD at Oxford. And she marries a properly posh person who I'm assuming she meets at Oxford, but we don't know that. And he inherits a Scottish island. And so she moves with him and her two young children to a remote island in the Hebrides. And hence, this is why I'm excited about it, because I don't have two young children, but I moved with my husband to an island in the Hebrides. He didn't inherit it, there's some parallels. And the story is very much about her struggle to maintain a sense of herself, and with the children have kind of colonized her body. Her husband wants sex, and there's no time for her to do. She's an academic. There's no time for her to write her book, and so it sort of sets up this idea of her body and the island as avatars for each other that have kind of been colonized and taken ownership of. And then in the midst of that, she is planting a tree in the garden, and she finds the skeleton of a baby. Uh-huh. And so that triggers a police investigation. And I think she suffered quite seriously from postnatal depression and has probably thought about throttling her own kids more than once. And so again, that gives her this opportunity, because she's a historian, to sort of dig into the past and to try and figure out who this baby is. But really, it's about her trying to find a way back to herself. And along the way, we get stories about the Highland clearances and about the islanders in the 1800s and the kind of the gap of cultural understanding between islanders and mainlanders. And essentially misogyny and colonialism are all smushed up together in this kind of whodunit.
Right.
So I don't want to give away too much.
No.
That's about what I can tell you.
It's you said whodunit. There's obviously a historical detective story in there, but a lot of other stuff that you probably can't really squeeze into a couple of hours on stage. So how do you find your way through that in an adaptation?
Yeah, I mean it's been a fascinating process, because Shireen Mula, who is the playwright who's adapting it, when I first moved to Mull, I think I read this in the first 6 months that I moved here, and it's taken us this long, for various reasons, to sort of pick through it and adapt it and figure out how it would work, because there is so much. And really, what we came down to was we have to follow Anna's journey. So this journey from loss of self into self, essentially. So this sense of being kind of at the mercy of everyone, and then she starts to maybe get something back that she recognises that isn't just about her kids or her husband or other things. And so if we made that the frame, if everything was through Anna, and then now I'm in the middle of rehearsals, and I sort of think it was a little bit insane, but we were like, right, this woman is carrying so much, and her exhaustion and the labour of existing is such a big part of the story. How do we make that evident in the show without her just being constantly at 10 in terms of the stakes and the pitch all the time.
Yeah.
And so what we did was we decided that we'd make it a one-person show, and the actor is playing all of the characters, so that the actor's labour mimics the character's labour. And so it's this absolute Nicola Jo Cully who is performing. It's a virtuoso performance she's giving. It's phenomenal what she's doing. And then that way we get this sense of just the difficulty of existing in a world with young children, existing in a world with young children when you've got a job and you meet writing deadlines, like difficulty, all of that, plus being on a remote Hebridean island with no roads and no shop and no post. And so everything, there's a boat between you and, I'm putting in air quotes here, civilization.
Right.
So I think that was how we decided to frame it, and then pretty much that helped make sure we knew which strands needed to go in and which didn't.
And it's hard work for an actor, a solo show like that, but actors do love that sort of thing, don't they? It's a good example. It's a good chance to show off, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And Nicola's, I mean, she's brilliant. She's I've never known an actor so hardworking. There's a scene in the bath in the play, and Nicola's been rehearsing it in the bath at home. She's really digging in.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think she's had to learn like 6 or 7 different accents, and there's a scene in the play that takes place in Scots Gaelic. So she had a little bit of Gaelic, but she's had to learn Gaelic to do that. She deserves some sort of award. She's brilliant. Like I couldn't. I'm so glad we got her. I don't think we can manage it really.
But as a director, there's something about the intimacy of just two of you in a rehearsal room investigating a text that's quite special, isn't there?
Yeah. There really is, in this sense of, because also there's this particular book, Night Waking, and it also has not quite a sequel, but a prequel in Sarah Moss, the author's canon, called Bodies of Light. And so we've both gone and read that.
Yeah.
So we know things about the characters that the audience might not, but it means that they're our friends. And so, yeah, there's usually there's 4 of us in the room usually, which is my assistant director, Ben Standish, and our brilliant touring stage manager, Fergus. And we all sort of, it feels like we know these people.
Yeah.
Because we spend so much time with them. But also because I went home last night and I was exhausted just because of the focus. And I don't think I'd ever really realised that when you've got lots of actors on a stage, as a director, you engage with them all differently. You find the levers that suit for them. And that means that you're working with different tactics, and it kind of keeps refreshing your brain and your thinking. Whereas when it's one person, it feels like it's so much focus on one thing that it's really, really exhausting.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to keep rehearsal days short and things like that. Otherwise, we're just all going to go a little bit mad. But there may have been, I don't really drink, but last night there was half a bottle of wine just in my evening. And it's, and what's wonderful is that you sort of, I always find as a director, I mean this in a completely non-Me Too inappropriate sense, but I always fall a little bit in love with my actors because you see all the different facets of them, and you see their emotional core and how they think about things, and it's just it's such a wonderful privilege to be able to watch, and to be able to do that with one performer it's almost like being in a relationship with her, because we're going this utter gamut of emotions, and also Nicola, when you meet her as a normal human, she's very unassuming. She's I wouldn't say timid, but she's back-footed. She lets the people speak first. She doesn't want to put people out. And I remember her coming into the audition room, and I sort of thought, oh well, I'm not sure she'll be able to carry this, And then the second she opened her mouth in the role, she was just this she grew 10 times, and she was a different. And so just watching that every day, that process and that incredible skill.
Yeah.
I just sort of sit there open mouthed sometimes. I'm like, oh, is she doing that?
Yeah, I find that a lot with some great actors that, they'll give a devastating performance of the audience in the palm of their hand, and then they'll come off and say, was that all right? Timidly.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we're having that right now because, I think there are more lines for Nicola Joe to learn than in Hamlet if she was playing Hamlet in the show.
Right.
I don't say that lightly. I think it's about right. And she's sort of really, she's got them all already, and with the odd paraphrase because that's standard. So we're a couple of weeks out. That's how it goes. And she's really worrying about it. And it's like, hang on, let's look at what you are doing, not what you're not doing, because this is great. And so I think there's a thing about bolstering that confidence for her, because she hasn't got other people playing opposite her to reflect that.
Yeah.
So, it's a really odd mechanism where she has conversations with herself as a performer, and so she never has time to read herself or monitor herself in that way that actors do, because she's always being someone else. Yeah, I'm not sure I'll do it again, but it's a great and interesting process. So I think it really is the right thing for the show. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah. For a production like this, though, you've got to. It sounds like it's a fairly simple staging, especially if you've only got one actor. But you've got to think about it. Not just in your own theatre. It's got to fit into different spaces. So, are you conscious of that while you're rehearsing?
Oh yes. So at Mull Theatre, because we rehearse in the theatre, we're really lucky. We've got a big kind of mid-scale size stage,
right?
But we're touring to some mid-scale venues, but also because we're primarily a rural touring company, so we have to go into teeny tiny village halls, and we have to go into the Traverse or the Sits or York Theatre Royal. We have to go to these big spaces, and so everything we always do, everything we tour is designed to be scalable in that way. This one's interesting because we've got because the story and the character is sort of quite slippy, and she moves between teams and time changes. We've got a projected set so that the landscape is slippy and moves like the story does in an interesting way. And of course, then we need throw distance for a back projector behind the screens. And that simple thing, like last night, the reason that I had half a bottle of wine last night was because we put up the screens for the first time, and then we realized that we needed an extra kind of half a foot of throw distance. And so we shifted them in on the staging space, which is it's like 4 meters by 4 meters. So it's much smaller than it's less than half our stage.
Yeah.
And so we shifted everything in, and we were like, oh, there's this, and I can't tell you what it is, but there's a thing that we had to move as a result. And that means it has to be built differently. And so we were like, how do we move this thing? And like, how is that going to fit there? And anyway, it's figured out. But so this, from having this, I think our stage is something like, it's 10 by 10 meters, something like that. Yeah. So it's coming down really small. And so that means it can go anywhere, but then we have to make sure that the projection and all of the other stuff earns it the capacity to be in those big spaces.
You don't want to look lost in the middle of the Traverse stage.
No, you really don't.
Yeah.
And actually this won't. I think it's totally fine. And maybe there'll be some places where we're like, oh, maybe we get that extra 6 inches and there's a bit more breathing room,
Yeah.
But obviously we have to prep for the smallest venue, and then you expand.
Yeah. I was talking to a couple of other directors the other week where they were saying that some of what appear like great artistic decisions actually came purely from the practicality of where you can bring set on and off.
Always. Yes, always. Yeah. And I think there are things around, like we've got so Hugo Dodsworth's doing our production, and Nicolette MacLeod is our brilliant sound designer, and she's composing these kind of slightly musical oral landscapes. And one of the things that's idiosyncratic about Mull Theatre is that in a particular kind of rainstorm, and we're in the Hebrides, so we have a lot of rainstorms.
Yes.
And you can hear the rain in the auditorium. And so we've had to kind of build that in. So the soundscape takes, it's prepped for the day that happens. And in any other theatre, it doesn't matter. It's still just a beautiful soundscape.
Yeah.
But at Mull Theatre, the idiosyncrasy of the building means that this is what it will be like, and it will be absolutely kind of built here and off this place.
Right.
Which sometimes, as a director, that feels like an utter pain in the bum.
Yeah.
But actually, when you then look back at it, that's quite a beautiful thing, right? Not many things are built like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and most touring productions are the same everywhere, like you say, and apart from a bit of an adaptation. So it's nice to have, it sort of keeps you on your toes as well. It keeps the actor on the toes, doesn't it, where they have to react to things that might or might not happen.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we toured a show years ago in 2021, I think. We did Every Brilliant Thing with Naomi Stewart.
Yeah.
And there was some brilliant, it was such a simple set. There was a rug and some records at the centre, and it was all done in the round. And then we found that in some places there was one place, let's be honest, there was one village hall where somebody turned up in their wellies and walked sheep poo across the rug. So all of the bits where Naomi was sort of sitting, like doing her brilliant acting, she was sitting in sheep poo. And so then we had to build in how we deal with sheep, how do we deal with sheep poo?
Yeah.
And other such things. And so certainly there's a thing about, because not again, normal in air quotes, but like in a normal theatre space, you're not going to get sheep poo.
Yeah.
But again, because we have this again slightly bonkers but brilliant and important setup where we insist on doing the same show in a village hall to 10 people that we do to the Trav to however many hundred. Like, you have to, all of that kind of planning and risk assessment and just practical juggling has to be built in. And so sometimes you send your list to theatres, and they're like, why what's the sheep poo clause? What's that about? and you have to explain. So, but I think because I moved up, I came to this job. Before this, I ran my own company, but then before that, I ran Ovalhouse in Brixton. And coming here, it's fascinating because the concern, like, there's lots of stuff that's really similar. Like, you're building work for the community, or everything has to be rooted. It has to be really specific, but the way that happens is so utterly different. And the way that we have to think about our audiences, because, in Brixton, asking people to travel an hour is no bother. They're just going to get on the Victoria line and come, But
maybe not this week because of the strikes, but
maybe not this week. But here, like, we're asking people sometimes to get on boats.
Yes.
Or we're asking them, there's one place we play where they have to walk across a causeway at a specific tide, at tide times.
Yeah.
And we are the only producing theatre company on an island definitely in Scotland, and I think maybe in the UK, but I need to check that. Don't come at me if I'm wrong. And so all of those, we're the only people that have to worry about that.
Yeah.
How the audience are coming on boats. Okay. Yeah. And so there's a real joy. There's a joy to figuring out what the sheep poo clause is for every show.
Because of that, does that mean that it's not just a theatre production? Because most theatre productions, at the end of it, the staff are stood on the door saying goodbye, see you next show.
Yeah.
But are there times when they hang about a bit more than other theatres, or when when they can't get the boat yet, or you've got to entertain them or accommodate them?
Depending on where we are, absolutely. Like, this show is touring with its own. We've got our own tea, and because there's a lot of sort of trying to get babies to sleep and having tea, in the show, and so we have a sleepy time tea that you can stay and have tea And Mull has a brilliant island biscuits. You will have eaten them in fancy hotels around the world. Yeah. And so, we're making sure that our audience has tea and biscuits for those times when weather or whatever means that they are with us for longer. And we quite often tour with our own front of house to make sure that there's that kind of care for the audience, because some places we don't have that. And again, that's a completely different setup, because any other theatre pretty much any other theatre in the world, and you send a show out on tour, you are not sending a front of house crew with it.
No.
No. So, yeah. And then here there is a thing about, because here on Mull, when we're working, when we're rehearsing, so the team are here for sort of 4 or 6 weeks before the show, and they will get to meet, they go down Main Street and they buy their lunch and they meet people and they talk about what they're doing. And so there's a really direct relationship with the audience, not just for me or for the team that work at the theatre, but for all the freelancers.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, the lady that I bought my breakfast from is in the front row, or such and such from down the road. And so if they don't like it, or if there's something, if they have ideas, or if it sparks something in them, those conversations are really immediate and really direct and really reciprocal, in a way that you kind of, like, you might get on press night in a big theatre, but it's usually only with people that are like in the theatre sphere or the art sphere. So, if it's if I'm not going to say any specific names, but if it's like Bob from down the road,
Yeah.
you know, you know pretty quickly what Bob from down the road felt about it, and whether you should do that again, and whether he's going to invite his friends, and what he cared about, and that, you know, that's brilliant.
I can imagine for actors that aren't used to that, they could be a little disturbed by that, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably yes, but I think I'm quite careful. I'm quite careful about who I work with,
right?
And like, because for me, like I grew up in a little Greek fishing village,
yeah.
And so I think we used to live in this flat above the butcher's shop in the middle of the village, and there was a balcony that looked down onto the crossroads that was the village centre. And anything that happened, like someone had an affair, the fight happened at that crossroads. You know, someone was late for work, the fight happened at that crossroads. Like a teenager was sneaking out, they went past that crossroads. And so it was like watching life as theatre.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably why I became a theatre maker, was just that experience of watching life. And so for me, everything about theatre and storytelling is about this reciprocal conversation with the audience.
Yeah.
And hopefully the audience are happy to talk back in a way that is supportive of the production, but by which I mean they're not going to yell in the middle of like an important soliloquy, unless you've really activated them.
Yeah.
And but that's what's exciting about doing it, right? If again, I think I like to make theatre that feels like it adds something to the sum of human knowledge, or adds something to the way we understand or think about the world. And so if I'm trying to do that, I need the conversation to understand if that's hitting, if that landing, is it not? Like, what do you think about this? How are we going to think about this separately and together? And so I tend to look for people and collaborators that are cool with that.
Yes, yeah.
Certainly on Mull, it would be hell otherwise.
You know, there's so many productions by producing theatres that I see are co-productions now that travel around a few different theatres, like the production I saw at Bolton the other night. And I've spoken to a few artistic directors who said it's great that because you have resources, you know, you can pool resources, but I would like to be able to produce something for my audience again, like we used to. And it looks like you can do that, can't you?
Yeah, I mean, we used to be able to. We used to produce a minimum of 3 things in-house a year, and inflation has happened.
Yeah,
and we're down to kind of 1.5 a year ish. But we also do co-productions, and we do those resource sharing things. So we've got. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about this. I think maybe I can't tell you what this is because I've just given a quote to the press release. It's not announced.
Okay.
So we've got a collaboration coming up with 2 really big flagship English theatres, and they have a completely different, on paper, audience from us. But the content of the show, the piece itself, is about essentially empathy and how we find empathy in this world where increasingly, just looking at the March this week, everyone else feels frightening or opposed to us. And how do we find empathy and common ground and move through impossibly difficult emotional experiences? And that's really resonant in England because of those marches that we've all just seen and all the other things. But also on the island here, that's incredibly resonant because we're all in it.
Yeah.
And it can be quite fractious, right? Because it's like living in this massive dysfunctional family that never goes home. It's like Boxing Day year round. And
right.
and so finding ways to kind of have empathy and civil discourse and common ground is really, really vital. And so we do those co things, but for me there has to be a reason for me to be putting the resources of this place into that show in some way. It doesn't have to be about us, but it has to be about something that we care about.
It has to resonate.
Yeah.
Even so, you said you were brought up on a small island, but even so, coming from Brixton, the Ovalhouse as it was then, to Mull, it must have been, professionally at least, it must have been a bit of a culture shock.
Well, there was a pandemic in between.
Right, yes.
So I left Ovalhouse, I went and ran Arch 468, which was my company, which is an international touring company. And then the pandemic happened, and I didn't see people apart from on Zoom. And my husband is immune suppressed, and so we really didn't see people for quite a long time. And so at the point at which this job, it was suggested that I apply for this job, I was like, oh well, I would get to leave the house because literally the islands weren't locked down in the same way that they were because COVID didn't get there. So there is something about that segue through not seeing people that helped mitigate the culture shock. And really, it's like going back to my Greek village. Like, it isn't exactly, but there's a lot of real similarities in terms of how the community function and the geography. It rains a lot more and it's a lot colder, but, we cope. Really, the culture, I think the biggest culture shock was about resources and what you can get. So if I'm doing a show like 5 miles that way, the listeners cannot see where I'm pointing, but just over the sound, because I can see the sound of Mull from where I am, then I can order something on Amazon or eBay and expect it to be delivered within 24 hours.
Yeah.
So things like that. Whereas here, you have to add at least 24, if not 72 hours on a good day. And if the ferries aren't running. So like right now I'm waiting for a Persian rug to arrive to the set. And they haven't sent me the tracking and is it gonna come? Is it gonna be here? And it seems like such a simple thing, but it means that there's loads of person time spent worrying about things. Yeah. And then you find a way around it. So I've got a rug in my office and I'm like, well, maybe worst case, we steal that till the other one arrives.
Yeah.
And if I was on the mainland, if I was still in London, there would no be worst case. There would not be that. I'd be like, no, we must absolutely have this. And so it sort of focuses your mind onto what the priorities really are and what actually matters.
Yeah.
Because what's available is that little bit narrower and that little bit more difficult. Yeah, I'm finding a good thing out of something that drives me mental there.
Yeah. Is there anything else anything that you miss apart from the Amazon deliveries, anything you miss from London that you can't get there? Or...
Oh, God. Yeah, I'm going to say dim sum. Like international food.
Yeah.
International food and specifically Asian food. Like a really good, I don't know, Vietnamese something or Korean fried chicken. Just being able to walk out and experience the world. So I miss the cultural diversity. And I miss I was in London for 20 odd years and I had my tribe and I miss them. Like, everyone's having kids now and I'm not there. So I miss that a lot. But actually this job is in so many ways is the perfect job for me because we're not just a theatre, we've got a gallery and we have a music venue and we have a creative learning program. And so I trained as a singer. I've got a practice as a potter.
Yeah.
So all of those things are kind of part of my life, and so I get to be doing all the cool art all the time.
Yeah.
In a place where it matters to people. Like if we don't exist, there is no live theatre of this place. There isn't a gap. There are things that just are taken away from a community and a culture that are devastating. And so, I loved my job at Ovalhouse, but if we had disappeared, there were 100 other theatres that could fill that gap.
Yes. Yeah.
They might not have chosen to, but they could. Whereas here, it's us. We've got to make it work because it's us. That's
so where's the nearest other theatre?
There is. So there's a receiving. It's kind of a receiving art centre that's over at Oban, the Rockfield Centre, but they don't have funding they don't produce, and they're a less well resourced place than us. They do brilliant work, but they just haven't got enough money. And that would be from where I'm standing now. That would be a 40-minute drive to the ferry, an hour's wait to get on the ferry, an hour's ferry journey, and then a 10-minute walk, or so 2 or 3 hours.
Right.
As the crow flies, I have no idea.
Yeah. So you've got to be really sure it's something you're going to want to see then, really, especially coming back at night.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, you can't. So it's because of how ferries run, they stop at different parts of the year. They stop earlier. So sometimes the last ferry is at like 6 p.m.
Right.
And sometimes it's at 10, and it just depends on what the tourist season is doing.
Yeah.
So you can't just pop. There's no way you can pop for arts and culture. So we do have a brilliant. There's a charity in Scotland called the Screen Machine, and they send cinema. It's essentially like the kind of like a Sainsbury's lorry or a Tesco lorry, but its sides fold out and it becomes a cinema, and it puts parks in your village hall car park or our pub car park, and you buy your tickets and you can go and see a film, like whatever is on in the cinema that week, and it sort of comes 2 or 3 times a year. That is the most exciting, and it's mobile.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a completely different experience. And I used to go and see, I would see 4 shows a week and a couple of, exhibitions a week in my London life.
Yeah.
And I probably could do that with music here because there's a really big music thing, and there are galleries, but I would I would get through what was available really quickly.
Yeah.
Or it would be stuff I was in charge of.
Yeah.
That's less fun.
Yeah. Running a theatre that's got a sort of captive audience, the obvious thing would be to go for crowd pleasers, an Akeborn or a Coward or maybe the occasional Shakespeare or something. But you produce new work, which is harder and more expensive. So,
yeah. And your question is, what the hell are you doing there, Atkinson? Yeah. So that's, our audience is actually really sophisticated. They're really smart. There's a really high proportion of people that have some sort of artistic practice or cultural practice here. And it's really important to me that the work we do is of this place, because and I'm going to say it again, we are the only producing theatre on an island. And so if no one else is doing it, we have a responsibility.
Yeah.
And so, we did a co-production of Shirley Valentine with Pitlochry, and it was great. It sold out. But it wasn't really all for this place. It was fun. And so what I'm trying to find, and I'm going to get better at it, but I'm trying to find the things that feel joyous and life enriching, but are still of here.
Yeah.
And what of here means is, that's a whole big can of worms, because this is an island that was populated by indigenous Gaels. Well, they're not really indigenous because the Picts were here first, but they're as near as damn it to an indigenous, of Gaelic people. And then they were cleared because of industrialism and capitalism and colonialism, and the community and the culture that lived here was laid waste to, and the language was laid waste to. But they're still here, some of them, and now the island is populated by those people, but also lots of incomers, lots of people who have come from for holiday and stayed, lots of people who come for seasonal work. And so it is such a islands are always a kind of cultural hodgepodge, and it is a cultural hodgepodge. And there's often quite sometimes the conversations around places like this can become quite kind of nostalgified, and we talk about like the ancient Gaelic heritage and all that, and that's really, really important.
Yeah.
But also what's important is who lives here now, and what is the future of this place and its culture, that encompasses that ancient Gaelic heritage, but it also encompasses, Linus, the Polish cab driver, who is an absolute icon of our community, because there's only 2 cabs, and it's really important.
Yeah.
And everyone knows him. So all of those things, who else, what play exists that's speaking to all of that? If I'm not commissioning it, it's not going to exist. And that's the joy. That's the joy and the challenge.
Yeah. And the responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure, I appear to be a posh English woman. I grew up in a little Greek fishing village. Why the hell am I? Why the hell am I the person that has this job? And there are people that say that to me in the co-op, and on Facebook, and that's part of the thing. But I'm really aware of the responsibility, and I'm really aware of the need to keep the conversation complex. So it's never just, no, we can't do that because that person isn't Scottish, whatever Scottish means.
Yeah.
Or that, that person isn't an islander, or that person is this, or what, let's have all of the full complexity of this community in the culture that we're making for it.
Yeah. And I notice you have a youth theatre group as well, which is
we do,
which is part of creating a community, isn't it? Getting young people involved as well.
Yeah, and actually I'm going to do some stats for you now, because I'm really fascinated by these. So, just to give, because people that haven't been here, Mull has 3,000 permanent residents. That rises to 16,000 in the summer with seasonal workers. And then we get about 700,000 tourist visitors every year. Now, let's just go back to those 3,000 permanent residents. We have 96 kids registered in our youth theatre, and we engage with every primary school on the island delivering free art stuff. So we quite often, I'm quite fond of saying, especially to people that might give me money, that for every person that we engage with as a proportion of the population, it's the equivalent to 4,000 people in London. So we are routinely selling out Wembley, routinely, as a proportion of the population. So each of those kids, 96 kids, oh God, I can't do the maths. Let's say it's 100. So that's 400,000 kids. Can you think of a theatre that engages with their community on that level?
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. So, the youth bit is brilliant, and they perpetually surprise me and are absolutely. And Angie Stevens, who is the head of creative learning, I mean, she exhausts me, and she's got so much energy, and she's sort of loved she's like a surrogate mum, because everybody on the island, almost everyone that's grown up on the island, has been through youth theatre or been through something. So everyone knows her, and that's a really lovely thing. Yeah, and as our youth theatre kids, they do things like NT Connections, and they have an international exchange with another youth theatre in Carcassonne that they do every 2 years, and so it's really great, because it's this forum for them to be engaging with the wider world and keeping the identity of this place, but letting it be in conversation with other places that might want to know about what it is to be on an island. There's a guy that I used to teach in drama schools, and there's a guy that I used to teach at East 15 who now runs the community theatre on Vanuatu in the South Pacific.
Wow.
An island. And my God, I want that cultural exchange, because I'm going.
Yes.
But that is the sort of thing, that's on my list to make happen.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of thing that would be really cool. And there is a cultural, and there's a reason. It's not just that Rebecca wants to go to the South Pacific and sit on the beach, although I do want to do it. Yeah, it's there's something about, because we're outside the normal rules, it allows us to be outside the normal rules, and take the promise of that as well as the challenge. And that's really cool for the youth theatre especially.
Yeah. I mean, I've been teaching youth theatre for over 30 years, so I know the value that it can have. But in a community like that, it gives them that. It's not just about training actors at all, is it? It's about giving them expression and life skills and all the things we put in the leaflets. But it's so important, isn't it?
And a voice, and the confidence to take their space in the culture. One of the things we're really proud of is that our youth theatre started the first Pride celebration on Mull, and now it's a regular event. And nowadays we sponsor it, and the local co-op helps. And it's a bigger community-wide thing. But it began with the kids from the youth theatre wanting to show solidarity with some folk in the youth theatre, and it began as this parade. Like a protest, like Stonewall.
Yeah.
And they could do that because they were given this space in the youth theatre where they were encouraged and facilitated to think in their own way, and they were encouraged to be brave to do so publicly.
Yeah,
that's
It's inspirational, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And it really is. And like, that was, I'm not going to take credit for that. It was way before my time. But like, on the days when I'm like, oh God, it's raining again, I'd really like some vitamin D. Or on the days when someone's been cross at me for for being an English woman doing my job, which happens. It's like, well, keeping that thing going, whatever made that possible, is worth pretty much anything that it's going to cost me.
Yeah.
Personally,
Another thing I noticed, you're co-hosting the State of the Nation at the Citizens Theatre in Glasgow in October. What happens at that?
So it's got quite big. It's spiraled. And so it began as a conversation between me and Louise Stevens, who runs Playwright Studio Scotland, because there aren't any forums where folk who run organisations and get together and go, right, how are we going to figure this out, guys? We haven't got quite enough money. We haven't got quite enough resource. We're seeing these problems. How can we work together to solve them? And we do that. Like you call your mate and you go, oi, can you help me? But then it's always reliant on personal relationships. And what if there was just a forum where that could be facilitated? And so that was the original conversation between Louise and I. And so we wanted to host an event where people could come and find a way through just the perpetual resource shortage that is arts and culture in the UK, but specifically in Scotland. And so that's what it's for. But the demand for it has been phenomenal, and we've had to double capacity. And we're going to announce this week that's happening, because it's sold out within kind of 2 weeks. I mean, the tickets are free, but it's booked out in 2 weeks. And so now there's a strand for people that are running organisations to have that conversation we just talk about. But now there's also a strand for freelancers and independent practitioners to have a similar conversation about how they can fill the gaps to kind of keep making art. And then there'll be conversations around other places to get money. There'll be conversations about how we as an ecology advocate for ourselves, kind of cultural advocacy and campaigning. Because I think one of the things that happens UK wide is that things come heated and become adversarial and toxic, and it's often it often feels like freelancers versus buildings, or opera versus scrappy fringe theatre. There's all of this like stuff, and actually we're all just people who for some insane reason wanted to dedicate our lives to art and culture because we enjoy it, but also because we think it makes the world better. And so there's so much common ground, and there is collective power that we don't capitalize on, because we do that in fight and think. And so this is a forum where we're trying to build the very, very foundations of a sector that is operating from a basis of solidarity and collaboration rather than competition. I don't know if it's going to work.
It's worth a try, though, isn't it?
It's worth a try. Yeah. And so people, so if anyone's listening wants to come to that, it's on the 24th of October at the Citizens Theatre in Glasgow, please book via the Tobar and Mull Theatre website. Get my little advertising snap in.
Yeah, perfect. So is there anything else you've got Night Waking coming up? I'm going on tour quite soon, but is there anything else? There's something else that you can't talk about yet. Is there anything else you can talk about that's coming up?
What have I got? Well, I've got, I'm working a lot with a brilliant playwright, Catherine Dyson, at the minute. And one of the things, she wrote this brilliant play, I Will Still Be Dreaming. And I think that's coming up in 26, 27. It's not officially announced yet, but don't tell anyone. And that's a brilliant play it's about finding hope when it feels like there is no hope. And what it does is it sort of takes it's a series of vignettes or characters that kind of zoom out across time. So we start with something that matters really immediately, and then we zoom out by 100 years, and we zoom out by another 100, and we zoom out by 1,000.
Right.
And at 1,000 years distance, most of what I lie awake at night worrying about doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so it's a really interesting way to kind of look at the world that is quite hopeful. And I think there's something about giving people that breathing space, especially just now, to go, okay, I don't need to get emotionally activated by this. I can just let those people do that thing over there without yelling at them, you know. And I think that'd be quite a useful thing. So I'm super excited by that, mostly because there's a character in it who is a peat bog woman who has been she's been dug up from her peat bog, and now she's an archaeological artifact, and she's on international tour, but she's alive, and she's, you know, sitting in the airport bar drinking martinis, talking about, you know, what's important to you at that point. And then there's a character who is a Greenland shark. Greenland sharks are these brilliant deep water sharks, and they live for certainly hundreds, but maybe thousands of years. We don't really know. So there are Greenland sharks that are alive today that were alive when Henry VIII beheaded Anne Boleyn, for example. And so there's this Greenland shark that is a cabaret singer, you know, and there's this, and so there's a certain kind of, there's an abstract, there's a not quite silly, but surrealism to it that allows you to kind of sit back and think newly shaped thoughts in a way that a lot of work doesn't. Yeah, but I'm excited by that one.
That was Rebecca Atkinson-Lord, director of Night Waking, adapted from the novel by Sarah Moss by Shireen Mula, which opens at Mull Theatre on the 28th and the 29th of September 2025, before touring to Edinburgh, Stirling, Greenock and various other venues around Scotland, ending up back on Mull on the 31st of October at Dervey Community Hall. For more information, see www.antobarandmulltheatre.co.uk.
You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.